Okay, here we go. Well, I think we got to fix that screen a little. There. Okay. So, picking up where we left off, this is the beautiful picture. The sketch of the execution of Louis XVI. I mean, it's very graphic with the, yeah. But yeah, you can see where they're tied up. You also tie the wrists like behind, because you strap across the shoulders, tie the wrists behind the back, and then tie around the knees as well. No. They have to have it fall off into the basket, so they don't like catch it.
It wouldn't do anything.
It wouldn't do anything because they have it measured out where you have to be. And like for ladies, they would cut your hair off like even shorter than mine so that it wouldn't get in the way of the blade.
So it's a guarantee that your head's going to fall in the basket?
If the blade is sharp. And they would know that they had to sharpen the blade when it wouldn't cut all the way through the sinew. Because as we talked about with the beheading before, do we feel your neck? Everybody, make your neck go out. And then feel like all that sinew in there. Feel all that? That's all got to go through it. And then not only do you have this, but you got your spinal column and the spinal cords itself, which are very...
Yeah, you gotta get the spine.
You got to cut the whole thing. And so that's why this was a better way, because you're using the weight of the blade to come down instead of having to use human power. Plus, the guys who were picked to be the executioners were not always the sharpest tool in the bucket. Like, so these guys would come with this big axe, and the axe was heavy, but you still had to have man muscle to get it around and over. But how many of you have chopped wood and you've missed? And you're like, oh, or you sink it in the wrong spot, and you're like, oh, my arm, like it's never going to feel better from that ever again. So this like takes away that whole like, oh, am I going to get the neck? Am I going to get the neck? Am I going to, oh, dang it, the back of the head. Like, so, or sometimes, you know, if you sink that blade just wrong, you got to wrench the blade out and try again. This is why this was more humane, because you just...
My bad.
Yeah, whoopsies. And that's why Boleyn, but Catherine Howard, the second wife of Henry VIII, that was beheaded, she asked to have the execution block that you put your head on, because you have like a block of wood that you'd like lean over. And she asked to have it brought in the day before her execution so that she could practice getting her chin and head just right on the block to extend her neck long enough to be able to get the axe to hit it better instead of getting the back of the head or the shoulders. So she like practiced like, okay, if I go like this, then that really elongates my neck, but then you could catch my chin. So how do I? Yeah, she practiced, which is a little like grim for me, but.
That I feel like would be the worst way to like die. Like, and it was like they would like put this like cage over your stomach, and it would be hot, and then they put like a rat in the cage. Since the cage is hot, then the rat wants to get out.
So it
then
digs.
it just like eats you away.
Where did you hear that?
I just heard about it.
Ooh.
It's so gross.
Oh, yeah. I haven't read that in a long time.
What the part of Johnny got his gun, or he thinks just like a rat?
Yes, Johnny. Oh, yeah. Johnny Got His Gun is just a disturbing book to begin with.
Yeah, that is
You know, there you are. You're a stump with a hole in the face. You're a stump, and you don't know. That's got to be awful. I can't dwell on that now. I've got too much in my brain already. Okay, so tonight though I'll be laying there at 2 a.m. A stump. Beheading and getting the axe in the back of your head. Mr. Jaden, expect some crazy texts about 2 a.m. What do you think about? Because Troy will be like, roll over and go to sleep. All right, here we go. So France decides, remember we've got this war brewing because of the Declaration of Pillnitz. And France is now at war with Europe. The Girondins, not the Girondists. Remember, we're learning a little French here. The Girondins are at war with Great Britain, Holland. That's the combination of Holland and Belgium. Holland. It's their relationship name. Hey, Holland, how you doing? And so the the Girondins brings into this war, but the war is not going to go well because it just, the people, let's see, okay, the people of France are also kind of revolting against themselves, and the Girondins start this, but then the Girondins are getting attacked by the people for starting this war, so they're kind of taken out of the war, and now the Jacobins are in total control. The Jacobins that make up the Mountain, which is the, because the Girondins showed that they could not suppress the rebellion at home or suppress the rebellion outside the borders. So now the Mountain, which is the Jacobins plus the Sans-Culottes, are now fighting the war alone, and they're going to take it into some crazy, weird areas. But we have this guy, Edmund Burke. And Edmund Burke is a Irish-born writer, but he serves in the British government. Okay, follow? Good, good, okay. And so he writes a book. He's reflecting on all of this, and he's looking at what's going on in the world, because remember, we just had a successful revolution of people fighting against the ugly government in America. And so he naturally, like everybody would, compares and contrasts the revolutions. And he says, he writes this book called Reflections on the Revolution in France. Very clever title. And he is angry with how the French are doing this, because he's like, the only way this revolution is going to end is that in military despotism, where the military, it has to come in, squash everybody from the Jacobin, the Girondins, the Sans-Culottes, the people, and anybody who tries to come in and take over Napoleon, or Lord Farquaad, as I call him, and he's dead on. But he said, you know, that this is not going to end well because it's not organized well, and it's not led well, and the people are not thinking about this. They're reacting with anger and hangriness. They're not doing this in any way, shape, or form that's going to be successful. Because he said this is only going to bring us problems. He predicted the possible deaths of the king and queen because it's so out of control. They're going to be willing to stop at nothing. Nothing will deter them. And it's only going to cycle into madness. And everybody at first, especially one of our major guys, Thomas Paine, this is the guy, Letters from an American Farmer. He's, these are the times that try men's souls. How many of you have heard that phrase before? No, American history people. None of you watched that show, The Sons of Liberty, on the History Channel. Did you watch? I did not watch, but I heard it's great because we're too cheap to buy cable. But Thomas Paine was this writer. He was a British guy who was living in the colonies, and he's watching it all go down. And he's like, here's what I feel about it. And he was dead on. And he said that revolution, when done right, will lead to freedom. And so Thomas Paine says, no, you're wrong, Edmund Burke, that this is not how it's going to go. And he said, basically, Paine declared, from what we see now, nothing of reform on the political world ought to be held improbable. It is an age of revolutions in which everything may be looked for. So he's saying, we don't know how this is going to end. Who knew that the American Revolution was actually going to end in American freedom? They can turn this around, says Thomas Paine. And so we get this little bit of bickering going on between Paine and Burke in different writings and treatises and all sorts of things. But in the end, when France declared war on Austria, and as the book said, as the revolutionaries proceeded to attack the church, the monarchy, and finally the rest of Europe, people started to say, well, okay, Burke, I think you're right. Because it's not a focused attack. They have no one thing that they're fighting against. In the American Revolution, we can pinpoint the exact reasons why they are fighting. Taxation without representation. No representation in the government at all. And certain things forced on us by the British government. And they fight them individually and with a procedure. Here, we have people going off willy-nilly, tearing down prisons with their hands, fishwomen marching all over the countryside, and people dying left, right, and center, kachunka. And they're saying this isn't the way it's supposed to go. There's no method to the madness. If we had method, it would be fine. But there isn't. And now they can't get their own people under control. Now you're going to go fight other people? Brilliant. Good idea. That's smart. So, in April of 1792, they declare war on Austria. Other European monarchies recognized, along with Burke, the danger of both the ideas and the aggression of revolutionary France. They're too angry. You need to calm down, take a step back, and not be so dang angry all the time. So, William Pitt, looking at Britain, Britain's now afraid that they're next, that the people are going to rise up against the British government, even though they're so stable Mabels. They are not rocking any type of boat because of how they played it all out after the Glorious Revolution of William and Mary. But we've got William Pitt the Younger, not to be confused with William Pitt the Elder, who was part of the creation of some of the colonies. And he's the prime minister. William Pitt the Younger is the prime minister. And he's all about moderation, reform in Parliament. But he looks at the working class group and he gets Britain's prime minister approved act suspending habeas corpus, which is, this is one of those, yes.
Isn't it where the government can hold you without a trial? Or
Yes. Yes. Well worded, because I couldn't find my words there. The government can arrest you and hold you without charging you with anything to get you off the street, because you could be scary. And so they want to make sure that they are getting any form of revolutionary out of the way, because they don't want this happening. Because, let's quote one of my favorite movies, fire is catching. And so that's what Pitt is afraid of. If Pitt knew what the Hunger Games were, he'd totally agree. Because he's saying, if it happened in America, and now it's happening in France, there's nothing stopping the working class people who feel put upon by the government from rising up in Britain. We got to stop it. Even though there was hardly a mumble, they still have to stop it. He made writing of certain ideas treasonable. He also attempted to stop freedom of the press. And if you dared to oppose the government during this time, you would be charged with sedition or speaking out against the government in a wrong fashion, which leads to treason. So they're putting the thumb down on Britain. So, yay, William Pitt, taking rights away just in case you decide to act out. Okay, meanwhile, in Poland, because why wouldn't we just throw random things in here? But it does connect, because basically what this is showing is that everybody in Europe is afraid that this is going to spread. And so in Poland, the final two partitions of Poland, already noted in Chapter 9 with the enlightened thinkers, occurred as a direct result of fears by the Central and East European powers, Austria, Prussia, and Russia, that the principles of the French Revolution were establishing themselves in Poland. They thought the people of Poland, who wanted their own national identity, were going to start to sing and rise up against the government. And so they're like, we got to stop this. We got to control them, and we got to bring them under control so that they cannot rise up and make a Poland. So what are we going to do? They gave them a new constitution. The Polish patriots issued a new constitution. And they said, this is how we're going to run our area. We are going to allow ourselves elective monarchy with exclusive authority. We're going to elect a king. Yes, we will. King of Poland. We're going to have a bicameral diet. What is that? Let's use our word knowledge. What's a bicameral diet? Two something meeting. Okay, I feel like I'm on Sesame Street. Let's put it all together now. Two cameral. What's a cameral?
Camel.
Not camels. No camels in Poland.
Camera.
Not two cameras.
Pictures of camels.
Yes, two pictures of camels, and that's going to be our government. in a meeting, sitting around a table. So what do you feel about Poland?
2 cardinals.
No. What? No. 2 houses, okay? We are bicameral government because we have the House of Representatives and the Senate.
You can have 2 caramels a day, and that's the diet.
Elizabeth, they're now saying in the background, the row of dudes is saying you can have 2 caramels a day, and that's your diet. Not quite, because otherwise all you hear is mumbling, I guess, if we don't describe what's going on with you guys out in the monkey section. What?
Yeah, she really turned around and told us to shut up.
Are you feeling free?
Yeah.
Little, sure. But a bicameral diet, a 2-group meeting, so you can have 2 political parties. Okay, 2 groups in the diet, or the meeting of assembly. And they eliminated liberum veto. Liberum veto is the ability of the leadership to just veto everything across the board. They got rid of that, so that you can't, it's basically a system of checks and balances, that the one leader cannot just veto. Frederick William, this is Prussia, because we can't name them anything else. The Prussian Frederick William II moves in against Poland because Poland's like, we got this. We're going to get a leader. And they get a guy by the name of Tadeusz. I love Polish names. Kosciuszko. Kosciuszko. Any Polish friends in here that could maybe, or have a Polish grandma? Because normally grandmas can look at names like that and say, it's, potato. Oh, that's potato? Yes, it is. Okay. 377. Tadeusz Kosciuszko. Kosciuszko? I don't know. But he's a veteran. He's leading the Polish forces to get this done. Frederick William says heck no and sends in the military and squashes it. And also abolishes the Constitution and says, no, you're not having that Constitution. And Poland's like, but why not? Because you're not a country. Oh. So Poland, they're trying. Kadunk, no. Yes. Go. See, it's the key. It's the key. All right.
When does Poland actually become a country?
After World War I.
Really?
Really.
Oh wow.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was earlier than that.
No, they make a Poland in the 14 points plan and it sticks around for the Treaty of Versailles.
Okay.
Yep. So, Poland though, even though Frederick William really, even though Frederick William tries to squash this, Poland is still mutinying? No. Mutiny. Having mutiny. Because Prussia couldn't get it done, Prussia, Austria, and Russia all move in and say, we're not going to allow you to be this way. And so it's like separating the couple that won't leave its hands off each other. We're going to take this section and put it over here, and you're going to own that section, and you're going to own that section, and you're not allowed to communicate anymore because you're not your own. And they're like, but we want to talk. No, you can't.
Like
Can I just go
Romeo and
meet with...
Juliet.
Yes, Romeo and Juliet. Are you not a fan of Romeo and Juliet, or you are?
Yeah,
We're
Storyline is awful.
yeah.
Storyline of Romeo and Juliet's awful, but they're star-crossed lovers.
She's like 14.
I know, but
Like kill themselves over each other after like 3 days.
I know, that's the kicker that gets me. You've known each other for 3 days, and you're just so in love that you have to take poison and, oh, happy dagger, in your own chest.
Don't say you went through the same thing.
3 days?
3 days.
If it was a hot 15-year-old looking guy, you would probably do it.
Me? 15? It's creepy. That's like... I could have a 15-year-old. I would have been 20. That's, logistically okay. It's weird. Okay. Now another thing to think about in my poor overworked brain.
Your son and your husband can be like best friends. Pretty sweet gig.
Pretty sweet gig. Troy's shaking his head and he doesn't know why. Okay, so now here's where things get juicy. Okay, we're going to get juicy here with the Reign of Terror. Bum, bum, bum. So, we have a couple guys, okay? And I'm always surprised that our book doesn't really mention them a whole lot, at least not yet. We've got 3 guys. Their names are Maximilien Robespierre, Danton, and Marat. And these 3 guys, yeah, they're really fun. I think it turned out to be like 22 pages paper on why Robespierre did what he did. Because he was a misunderstood lad. I felt bad for him in the end. What? Yeah, from my French Revolution class in grad school.
You had a
Yeah.
whole class on that?
Yeah. It's my jam. Not really, I didn't like the class at all. But it's interesting stuff, I just didn't like the professor. But anywho, so, the Reign of Terror is where these 3 guys, and they're all Jacobins, they're all middle class. Marat was a writer. He's an interesting guy. He had a skin infection because he used to live in the sewers of France, and he picked up some bug, and it got into his skin. And so the only way he could feel better was if he soaked like 16 hours a day in a medicinal bath. And so he'd soak in a bathtub, and he rigged up this bath desk so he could sit in his tubby and write his newspaper. And he wrote the newspaper to the working class people to like make them rise up. And they'd like publish names of people who they wanted to arrest and people who they did arrest and kill. And it was like this big inflammatory newspaper. And then you had Danton, who was in charge of the military and the National Guard, and he was like keeping them going. And then you have this upper middle class, well-educated Robespierre, who is just kind of in charge of the whole thing. And so these 3 guys are running this together, and they're like, you know what, we're not doing enough, say these guys who are also part of the Mountain, who are also all Jacobins. And the achievements of the revolution, the idea of universal manhood suffrage, the writing of the Declaration of Rights of Man, the abolishment of the monarchy and the old regime, that's all in trouble, and that people are getting upset with the revolution, and they're going to eventually want to bring that all back. Bring back the king, well, not this king because he's dead and in a hole somewhere, but bring back the monarchy, bring back the old regime, because this isn't working and people are living in fear of getting their heads cut off. So what we need to do, says Robespierre, Danton, and Marat, is bring the revolution bigger and take out anybody who's speaking against the revolution. Because if we get rid of that voice that's bothering people, then we're going to be okay. So what do? They start rounding up anybody they can think of. They don't really put them on trial. They bring them in front of a bunch of judges and they say, you know, you are accused of speaking out against the revolution. Did you do it? And the people are like, guilty! And they throw them in jail for about a day and a half, and then the next day they drag them out and cut off their heads. Yeah, and they're just, and like, you could be arrested for selling your neighbor. Ooh, that was a little scary that our neighbor got arrested. You think it was scary that he got arrested? Well, maybe. You're speaking out against the revolution. And people are like, maybe they didn't look excited enough when revolution news came out. Maybe they didn't buy the newspaper written by Marat. Like, it got absolutely ridiculous why people were getting arrested and dragged off to get their heads cut off. And it was everybody. Peasants, nobles, clergy, business peoples, and ex-revolutionary leaders. If some leader said, you know, I think we're going at it a little bit harsh. Maybe we don't need to kill so much. You think we're harsh? Well, we did kind of kill that young mother that didn't have a husband because we had already killed the husband and now the kids are dying on the streets. You think that's harsh? Watch this! And they cut off their heads. They killed Danton. Danton told Robespierre one day, you know, I think we're good. I think we've made our point. You did not just tell me we made our point, says Robespierre. What?
Did he snitch on the guy then?
No, he told Robespierre himself. Robespierre had him arrested and killed him the next day.
Come on.
And he said, the only shame I have is that I'm dying before that rat Robespierre. That was his like final words. I did my part. He should die. And Robespierre's like, kill him. Take his head off. And so Robespierre is just signing list after list. And Marat is publishing list after list in his newspaper of all the people who should die. And it's everybody. I mean, real and imagined enemies are executed. They were killing upwards of 50 and 60 people a day by the guillotine, throwing them in big unmarked graves. Killing mothers and fathers in the same day. It got to the point where they'd have to stop every so often and squeegee off basically the guillotine because it was getting too slippery and too dangerous for the workers because of all the gore. And they'd have to sharpen the blade every so often because it was going through too many necks. It was awful. Awful, awful, awful what they were doing. And so the group that was doing this was called the Committee of Public Safety, and they were carrying out the duties of this executive branch of leading this revolution like a dictator. What I say goes, and that was led by Robespierre. So then what we have is the Levée en Masse. And this was led by Lazare Carnot, and he is a member of the Sans-Culottes. And the Sans-Culottes invaded this and demanded the expulsion of the Girondist members. And then, goodbye. Oh,
Bye.
lesson. That's right. Okay. I'm like, all right, you're done. Check you later. I think I get that every week. I'm like, where you? Because you just like backpack everything done. Okay. And so we have the Committee of Public Safety is in charge, and so they want to fight this war against the revolution and against the outside forces of Austria and Prussia. And so they have this basic draft. The Levée en Masse is this draft of people in order to conscript males into the army and directing the economic production to military purposes. This is basically going to a wartime economy. We're not going to build any more private or peacetime stuff. We're only going to build wartime materials so that we can effectively fight the revolution both at home and abroad in a better way. So, and with this, anybody who said, I'm not joining the military, I'm not going into the military, Akachulka. They killed them too. Basically, any reason to make the blood fly, they did. Because they thought if we scare enough people by threatening to cut off their head, they'll listen. It was a little crazy. So, here's our guy, Maximilien de Robespierre. And he is the leader of the National Assembly and the Committee of Public Safety. And he has the support of the Sans-Culottes, the long pants people. And he called for this assault on all enemies of the revolution. Everybody who is opposed to us must die. And a lot of people said, can't we just imprison them? Can't we just kick them out of the country? Can't we force them into the military? No. They are enemies of the state. They are treasonous. And they should die. Okay. So we killed him. He's a little scary. And he used the Jacobins to do his work. He believed that virtue was going to save this. And so he called for a republic of virtue. Civic virtue, largely understood, like this is basing off, I should start that over. This is based off of Rousseau's social contract, that everybody should work towards the good of the group. And so in doing that, if you are working towards the good of the revolution, you are supporting it. If you are not, you die. And this was led by Robespierre. And he said, if we don't fear then we will not have success. And I'm only doing this, he says, to be humane. I'm only doing this to save lives in the end. And you're like, Robespierre, how is killing people saving lives in the end? You're killing people for speaking out, but it's going to save lives in the end? Aren't we just causing this big rigmarole to occur? And he's like, no, we have to take care of this. And in the name of Republican virtue, he also wants to exclude women from active political life. They're going to de-Christianize France, take religion away, because religion is ridiculous, and use tribunals to dispense justice to the alleged enemies of the Republic. Basically, arrest courts. Throw them up, say this is what you're charged with, and we're going to kill you for it. So the repression of women. They were not allowed to go to the convention anymore. They were barred from the convention, not speaking. They were never really allowed to speak, but they were allowed to be there and watch the procedures. Now no women were allowed there at all. Your sphere is in the home. So we're going off that enlightened idea because that's so enlightened. They could not have any women's societies, from knitting clubs all the way up to Republican women groups. You're not allowed to meet anymore. Because we don't want women getting together and chatting. Because when they chat, they get ideas. And women with ideas are scary. They're a little crazy. Remember Olympie de Gouges, the lady who wrote The Rights of Women? Well, she was a little too much for them. They killed her. They beheaded her because she had too many ideas. Yeah, poor girl. But women were making demands that they said were ridiculous. They wanted to be able to wear the tricolor part in their hat to show that they were for Republicans. No, that's not for women. Only men should show that. And they're like, but I just support you. Can't I show that I support you? No, because that's thinking too much about government. And that's an idea. We don't like ideas. So separate spheres for men and women. They love Rousseau in the French Revolution. And then they get into one of their craziest things. They de-Christianized France. Now remember, France is heavily Catholic. They've got their Protestants. And they said we cannot have any religion in France because religion is not reasonable. We cannot explain faith with reason. So if we're going to be completely reasonable and give the power to the people, we have to get rid of religion so that we can be reasonable. So they started de-Christianizing. They got rid of a calendar. They made it 3 weeks of 10 days each so that there was no Sunday. They had to get rid of Sunday because Sunday was the day of rest and worship. So they made a new calendar system starting with year 1. Actually, what year was year 1? There's a special year because it was 12 months of 30 days each with names associated with the seasons and climate. Every 10th day rather than every 7th was a holiday. So that they couldn't have Sunday. The months of the revolutionary calendar were different things based on seasons. They destroyed Catholic and Protestant churches. They didn't destroy Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris, though, but they renamed it the Temple of Reason. And they got rid of all the statuary inside. So that they could just say, this is where we're going to go and worship the idea that we can think. And we can reason. And well, isn't that a God-given right? No! Off with your head. Okay. And so they killed a lot of clergy as well. Because the clergy were speaking out. They're like, okay, we get it. We get that you want a republic of the people, by the people, for the people. We're all in support. We get that you don't want the old regime. We get that you don't want the king. Fine. But why would you take religion away from people? Why would you take away something that brings them comfort in this time of craziness? All they want to do is pray to their God and wear their cross. No, it's not reasonable. You can't explain that with reason. It doesn't fit the mold. So it has to go. So they killed some clergy. And they're just getting a little crazy here. Churches, they sometimes just simply killing priests and nuns. Sometimes they forced priests to marry. Priest's like, I don't get married, I'm celibate. You will marry or else. Okay, I'll marry that nun so that you don't kill me and you don't kill the nun. It was just a little crazy. And then we get revolutionary tribunals. These revolutionary tribunals were, they were courts to try the enemies of the Republic, but what was an enemy was kind of cloudy. Nobody really had a defined idea of who was an enemy of the state. And so people that we killed, Marie Antoinette and the royal family, brought her up on trial, and she's like, I got nothing. I don't know why you're doing this to me. Girondin politicians, because the Girondins said that people outside of Paris should control the country, and the Jacobins said no, only Parisians should control the country. Peasants opposed to the revolution. We were bringing people in from the countryside to kill them, because if you're speaking out against the revolution, you obviously deserve to die. And some members of the Sans-Culottes, the people who are in charge of this. This is a good one. In early 1794, the terror moved to the provinces, where the deputies on mission presided over the summary execution of thousands of people, most of whom were peasants who had allegedly supported internal opposition to the revolution. One of the most infamous incidents occurred in Nantes, on the west coast of France, where several hundred people, including many priests, were simply tied to rafts and drowned in the river Loire. Loire? No? Okay. The victims of the terror now came from every social class, including the Sans-Culottes. So they just tied people to rafts and sunk the rafts. Can you imagine an awful way to die? You're tied to other people going down in the river. Awful. Awful, awful. All because they spoke out against the revolution in some way. And we also had mass shootings as well, but the guillotine in Paris was the biggest deal. Here's a sketch made by Jacques-Louis David. We talked about him as the romantic artist, or not romantic, the Rococo artist of the French Revolution. He was watching she thought she was going to be escorted to the guillotine in a carriage like her husband was. When Louis was killed, they put him in a fancy carriage so that people couldn't get at him and attack him on the way. She thought she would be awarded the same thing, but nobody liked anybody Austrian because they were at war with Austria on the outskirts, and so she was Austrian birth, and so they put her in the paddy wagon with every other criminal. And people were spitting on her and throwing things at her as she was going to her death. She was dressed in her nightgown and her night hat, and she wore the big beautiful wigs of the era. But underneath, once she got arrested and she had her children taken from him, because for whatever she was a good mother. She loved being a mom and she loved her children. And once she had her children taken away from her, within weeks her hair went completely gray with stress and sadness. And so they took her wigs from her, which she was known for, and they took all of her prettiness away, and they hacked her hair off real short before she died. So it was a shameful thing. And this was her sketch by David as she was riding away to her death in the paddy wagon. This is on page 384 of your text. So they killed her, killed some other members of the royal family, and it was awful. But then, eventually, the leaders of this revolution turned on themselves, and they started fighting amongst each other. One of the major people that died, like I said, was Danton. And then Robespierre kind of went a little off the hinge. And he starts calling out even his closest allies and his closest friends and sending them to the guillotine because he wanted to be in total control of this revolution. And anybody who was opposing him needed to go away. So, they had the law of 22 Parial, which is the law of the month of Parial on the 22nd day, where they said You didn't even need to hear any evidence. You could just kill to kill. Just get them out of their homes in the middle of the night, put them in prison, and the next morning take them off to the guillotine. And people are like, wow, Robespierre, you're going a little far. Plus, Robespierre had this big speech where he was naming people, and he said, it's very similar to Senator Joe McCarthy and the witch scare of the 1950s. I have a list of people who are speaking out against the revolution, and they will all die by nighttime. And people are like, dude, haven't we killed enough? No, and for saying that, you're going to die too. And so then, he also named himself the goddess of reason. Goddess, we're not sure. Yeah, he's the goddess of reason. He had this big pageant where he came down from the heavens with the book of reason, and people are like, you have gone to the loony bin, Mr. Man. You need to be paused. And so people are afraid of him. So people came to arrest him, and he's like, I'm not going to let him get me. I'm not. And so he had a gun, and he was going to kill himself by shooting himself through the roof of the mouth. Well, he was shaking, and then he didn't know what to do, and so he decided to shoot himself through the temple because he thought he'd be able to like steady it against his temple to shoot himself as they're running down the hall to get him, to arrest him, to take him to the guillotine. And they get him, but he had shot too early and had gone through his jaw, completely taking out the bottom of his face, but he lived. And so they took a handkerchief and tied his head together and laid him on the table where he would sign like the death warrants, like, we're going to go arrest these 5 people and kill him. And so he laid there all night in terrible agony as they discussed over him, what are we going to do with him? So then they threw him in prison, brought him up in front of his own tribunal that he appointed, and they said, you've gone too far. You've done too much. And then he had a real long ponytail. He wore his hair naturally, and he powdered it in the fashion of the day. And they tortured him then a little bit because you can just imagine your whole jaw is shot apart. And they yanked on his hair, and they cut his ponytail off, which caused him extreme agony. And then they put him in the paddy wagon and took him to the main guillotine in Paris and cut off his head. And with that, everybody kind of stopped and looked around and said, we just killed our leader again. We killed the king, and then Robespierre stepped up. And now we killed Robespierre. What are we doing? Who are we? And so in my cartoon version, I imagine them like, yeah, Robespierre's dead. And then somebody's like, hey, Robespierre's dead. Did we just kill our leader? I think we did. And they all kind of are like sheepish, and they all kind of shrink back, and they all just kind of like put their hands in their pockets and walk away. Like, huh, okay. Now what? The leader went too crazy, so the people killed the leader. Who's gonna lead? We don't know. Here's a picture of his assassination, or not his assassination, of his beheading. And it shows this is actually Robespierre himself killing it's like a political cartoon of sorts. He considered the terror essential for the success of the revolution. In this caricature, having already guillotined all the people in France, Robespierre must himself execute the executioner because there's nobody left. So basically, he killed himself by his actions. He took his actions too far, and in his actions, he got himself killed. So, quickly get a drink, go to the bathroom, stretch a little bit, and we'll come back and talk about how we fix this.